Welcome to K2 Crest Audiobooks Hub. Listening to books is very important. Why? Because it saves your time. You can learn while driving, walking, or cleaning. It makes you smarter every day, without extra effort. So get ready. Today we will talk about a new book. This book will change our lives forever. Feel the energy. Let's go.
Let's start the book. The 48 Laws of Power. Introduction. Mastering the Invisible Art of Control. Step into the fascinating, often hidden world of human dynamics, where influence is the ultimate currency. This book summary unpacks Robert Greene's masterpiece, a profound exploration of the psychological and historical forces that govern our interactions. You will discover why some individuals effortlessly command respect while others struggle to make their voices heard. By stripping away the illusions of human behavior, this guide offers you a protective shield and a strategic roadmap for modern life. We will delve into centuries of history, extracting timeless wisdom that is highly applicable to your career, relationships, and personal growth. Prepare to view the world through a completely different, intensely clear lens. Mastering these principles will permanently transform how you navigate the complexities of society. Point 1. Unmasking the game of human dynamics. Human beings are inherently social creatures, locked in a continuous, complex dance of influence and persuasion. To understand the mechanics of this dance is to understand the very fabric of our society. We often grow up believing that the world operates on pure meritocracy, where hard work and good intentions are always rewarded with success and respect. However, history and human psychology reveal a vastly different reality. The world operates on an invisible current of power, a shifting dynamic of leverage, perception, and strategy. Robert Greene's analysis across 3,000 years of history demonstrates that power is not necessarily about malice or cruelty. Rather, it is an amoral force, much like gravity or electricity. It simply exists, and those who understand its laws can navigate life with profound grace and effectiveness, while those who remain ignorant of it are often swept away by its currents. The most crucial realization you must make is that the game is always being played, whether you choose to acknowledge it or not. We live in a society that officially condemns the pursuit of power. We are taught to be fair, egalitarian, and entirely transparent. Yet, if you carefully observe the dynamics of any corporate office, political arena, or even a tight-knit social circle, you will see a different set of rules in action. People form alliances, withhold crucial information, subtly undermine rivals, and carefully curate their public images. To deny that this game exists is to place yourself at a severe disadvantage. The person who proudly declares that they refuse to play office politics is usually the first person to become a pawn in someone else's strategy. By refusing to learn the rules of the game, you do not elevate yourself above it. You merely make yourself incredibly vulnerable to those who are actively playing it. Consider the concept of the modern courtier. During the Renaissance, the royal courts of Europe were incredibly dangerous places. A courtier had to navigate the volatile moods of the king, the intense envy of his peers, and the constant threat of being exiled or worse. To survive, the courtier could not use brute force or direct confrontation. Instead, they had to master the arts of subtlety, indirect persuasion, flattery, and psychological insight. Today, the royal court has simply been replaced by the corporate boardroom, the social media landscape, and the modern workplace. The physical dangers may have vanished, but the psychological and professional stakes remain incredibly high. The modern courtier must still learn how to please their superiors, outmaneuver their rivals, and win over the masses, all while appearing effortlessly natural and completely non-threatening. This summary will guide you through the most crucial laws of this timeless game. We will explore how to manage your superiors, how to handle both friends and enemies, how to craft an impenetrable reputation, and how to maintain supreme emotional control. You will read stories of brilliant strategists who built empires and tragic figures who lost everything because they violated a fundamental rule of human nature. These historical narratives are not just entertaining tales from the past. They are precise blueprints of human behavior. Human nature has not changed fundamentally over the last few thousand years. The same desires, insecurities, fears, and ambitions that drove the emperors of ancient Rome and the strategists of feudal China are currently driving the people you interact with every single day. As we progress through these chapters, it is vital to maintain an open and objective mind. Some of the strategies we will discuss may initially seem ruthless or overly calculated. However, you must view them as essential tools in your psychological toolkit. You do not need to use every tool to harm others. In fact, the highest application of these laws is entirely defensive. When you understand how manipulation works, you become immune to it. When you understand how reputations are destroyed, you learn how to protect your own. When you know how enemies plot, you can anticipate their moves and neutralize them before they can strike. The ultimate goal of unmasking this game is to achieve a state of personal freedom and emotional tranquility. When you are no longer baffled by the irrational behavior of your colleagues, when you are no longer blindsided by sudden shifts in workplace dynamics, and when you can accurately predict how people will react to your actions, you gain an incredible sense of inner peace. You move from being a reactive participant, constantly tossed around by the whims of others, to a proactive architect of your own destiny. The invisible forces that once frustrated you will become the very winds that fill your sails. Let us begin our deep dive into the first and most critical dynamic you will ever face: the relationship with those who hold authority over you. Point 2. Never outshine the master above you. Navigating the delicate relationship with those in power requires absolute psychological mastery and a deep understanding of human insecurity. The golden rule of any hierarchy, perhaps the most frequently violated law in the modern workplace, is to never outshine the master. It is a natural human impulse to want to display your brilliance, to prove your worth, and to show off your talents when you are trying to impress a superior. You might think that by demonstrating your exceptional skills, you will win their favor and secure a rapid promotion. However, this is a dangerous miscalculation that frequently leads to sudden and mysterious professional downfalls. History offers a brilliant, dramatic example of this dynamic in the story of Nicolas Fouquet, the finance minister to King Louis XIV of France in the 17th century. Fouquet was an incredibly intelligent, charming, and wealthy man who genuinely loved his king and wanted to secure the position of prime minister. To impress Louis XIV, Fouquet decided to throw the most lavish, spectacular party the world had ever seen at his newly constructed, breathtaking chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte. He hired the greatest architects, landscapers, and chefs in the world. The party featured magnificent fireworks, exotic foods, and a premiere play by Molière. Fouquet believed that by showcasing his immaculate taste, his vast connections, and his immense wealth, he was proving his indispensable value to the king. The psychological reality, however, was entirely different. King Louis XIV was a proud, arrogant man who needed to feel that he was the absolute center of the universe, the Sun King. As he walked through Fouquet's spectacular gardens and watched the dazzling fireworks, he did not feel admiration. He felt a deep, burning insecurity. He felt diminished. He felt that his own minister was attempting to cast a shadow over the throne. The very next day, Louis XIV ordered the captain of his musketeers, D'Artagnan, to arrest Nicolas Fouquet. Fouquet spent the rest of his life in solitary confinement, and the king immediately hired Fouquet's architect and landscape designer to build an even grander palace, Versailles. Fouquet's fatal mistake was failing to recognize that masters do not want to be impressed by your brilliance. They want your brilliance to amplify their own. When you display your talents too aggressively, you inadvertently stir up the master's insecurities. Every superior wants to feel secure in their position, superior in their intellect, and firmly in control. If you make them feel less intelligent or less capable by comparison, they will quickly find a way to replace you with someone less threatening. To master this dynamic, you must practice the art of strategic concealment. You must make your bosses appear smarter, more capable, and more charming than they actually are. If you have a brilliant idea, subtly planted in a way that allows the master to claim credit for it, or at least feel that they guided you to the conclusion. By making the master shine, you make yourself indispensable, and you secure your own steady rise up the ladder. Closely related to managing the spotlight is the profound power of managing your words. Always saying less than necessary is a hallmark of true authority. The more you speak, the more common you appear, and the more likely you are to say something foolish. Powerful people impress and intimidate by saying very little. When you remain silent or offer only vague, brief answers, people project their own thoughts and insecurities onto you. King Louis XIV was a master of this technique. When his ministers would present him with complex, agonizing policy decisions, expecting a long debate, the king would listen in complete silence, look at them with an unreadable expression, and simply say, "I shall see." Then he would walk away. Those 3 words terrified his subordinates and kept them completely off balance, firmly cementing his absolute power. In our modern, over-communicative society, where people constantly overshare their thoughts, emotions, and plans, silence is a devastatingly effective weapon. When you speak less, your words carry infinitely more weight. People lean in to listen when you finally do open your mouth. Furthermore, by keeping your plans and thoughts concealed, you prevent your rivals from gathering intelligence about your weaknesses or your strategies. You cultivate an aura of mystery and unpredictability, which naturally draws people to you and makes them eager to win your approval. Finally, when you do need to prove a point or win a disagreement with a superior or a rival, never rely on verbal argument. Win through your actions instead. Arguments inherently trigger defensiveness. When you argue with someone, even if you present flawless logic and undeniable facts, you are attacking their ego. Even if they concede the point verbally, they will secretly resent you. The great Renaissance artist Michelangelo understood this perfectly. When he was carving his legendary statue of David, the mayor of Florence, Piero Soderini, came to inspect the work. Soderini, trying to sound like an art expert, complained that the nose of the statue was entirely too large. Michelangelo knew that the nose was perfectly proportional, and he knew that Soderini was standing at a bad angle. However, instead of arguing with the mayor and insulting his intelligence, Michelangelo simply invited Soderini to step back to a different vantage point. The artist then climbed the scaffolding, secretly grabbed a handful of marble dust, and began lightly tapping his chisel against the nose without actually altering the stone at all. He let the marble dust fall to the ground. After a minute of this theatrical performance, he asked Soderini to look again. The mayor, his ego satisfied, proclaimed that the nose was now absolutely perfect and that Michelangelo had brought the statue to life. By choosing action over argument, Michelangelo saved his masterpiece, protected the mayor's pride, and secured his own continued employment without creating a powerful enemy. Point 3. Turn enemies into your greatest assets. Navigating the complex webs of human relationships requires a clear-eyed understanding of loyalty, betrayal, and strategic utility. One of the most counterintuitive yet profound lessons in the pursuit of success is learning how to properly evaluate friends and enemies. Our natural inclination is to surround ourselves with friends. We hire them, we partner with them in business, and we trust them with our most critical tasks because they provide us with a sense of comfort and familiarity. However, mixing friendship with power dynamics is frequently a recipe for disaster, driven by the unpredictable and volatile nature of human emotions. History warns us repeatedly about the dangers of placing too much trust in friends. Consider the tragic tale of Michael III, the emperor of the Byzantine Empire in the 9th century. Michael was a young ruler who deeply valued his friendship with a man named Basilius. Basilius was not a nobleman. He was a lowly horse trainer who had saved the emperor's life in a moment of danger. Out of deep gratitude and genuine affection, Michael showered his friend with gifts, elevated him to the highest ranks of the court, and eventually even made him co-emperor. Michael believed that because he had given Basilius everything, Basilius would remain eternally loyal. However, human nature dictates that when people are granted power without earning it through their own prolonged struggle, they often become ungrateful and resentful. Basilius did not want to remain the subordinate, indebted friend forever. The weight of the emperor's charity became an oppressive burden on his ego. To step out of Michael's shadow and claim absolute power for himself, Basilius orchestrated the assassination of his best friend and benefactor, taking the Byzantine throne for himself. The brutal lesson here is that friends are exceptionally quick to envy. Because you share a close bond, the boundaries between you are blurred. A friend feels they have the right to challenge you, to demand more, and to take your generosity for granted. When a professional relationship sours between friends, the resulting fallout is always deeply emotional, vindictive, and thoroughly destructive. Conversely, a known enemy can often be transformed into your most reliable and hardworking asset. While a friend expects favors, a former enemy expects nothing. If you extend an olive branch to an opponent or hire a former rival, they have something to prove. They will work relentlessly to justify your unexpected trust. They are highly motivated by the desire to demonstrate that they are worthy of the position, and the boundaries of the relationship remain strictly professional and sharply defined. Take the case of Abraham Lincoln, who brilliantly applied this principle when forming his presidential cabinet. Instead of filling his inner circle with loyal sycophants and close friends, Lincoln appointed his most bitter political rivals, men like William Seward and Edwin Stanton, who had previously insulted him, opposed him, and actively campaigned against him. Lincoln recognized that these men possessed exceptional talents and massive political influence. By bringing them into his cabinet, he neutralized them as external threats and harnessed their immense capabilities for the benefit of the nation. He knew exactly where they stood, and their mutual animosity was channeled into competitive productivity rather than hidden sabotage. In your own life, do not shy away from working with people you dislike. If an opponent possesses a skill you need, find a way to align your interests. Their predictability and their drive to prove themselves make them incredibly valuable tools. However, when you face a true enemy, someone whose very existence threatens your security and with whom no alliance is possible, you must adopt a completely different mindset. If conflict is entirely unavoidable and reconciliation is impossible, you must resolve to crush your enemy totally. This does not necessarily mean physical destruction. In the modern world, it means completely dismantling their ability to harm you professionally, financially, or socially. The danger of showing mercy to a committed enemy is immense. If you stop halfway, if you leave them with a shred of power, influence, or hope, you are merely allowing them time to recover, regroup, and plot their revenge. A wounded opponent is far more dangerous than an unharmed one, as their resentment will burn hotter than ever before. Look at the ancient Chinese conflict between the brilliant strategist Liu Bang and the fierce warlord Xiang Yu. Xiang Yu had multiple opportunities to completely eliminate Liu Bang during their prolonged struggle for dominion over China. Yet, out of a misplaced sense of honor or moments of fleeting sympathy, Xiang Yu hesitated and allowed Liu Bang to escape and rebuild his forces. Liu Bang possessed no such hesitation. When the tables finally turned, Liu Bang trapped Xiang Yu and annihilated his army, forcing the great warlord to take his own life. Xiang Yu's half measures led directly to his utter destruction. In your career and personal life, this principle translates to setting absolute boundaries and ensuring finality in conflicts. If you must fire a toxic employee who is actively sabotaging your business, do not give them a prolonged transition period or access to your company's sensitive data out of pity. If you are severing ties with a manipulative partner or a deceitful business associate, cut the cord completely. Do not leave the door open for future negotiations or emotional manipulation. Remove their access to your network, secure your assets, and leave them with no leverage whatsoever. Empathy and compromise are beautiful virtues in times of peace and mutual respect. But when dealing with a dedicated adversary, partial victories only guarantee future wars. Point 4. Guard your reputation with your life. In the complex theater of human interaction, your reputation is the most powerful, invisible asset you possess. It is the cornerstone of your influence, preceding you into every room you enter and lingering long after you leave. A carefully crafted reputation does an enormous amount of heavy lifting for you. It can intimidate your rivals, attract valuable allies, and secure your position without you having to utter a single word or lift a finger. Conversely, a damaged reputation leaves you vulnerable to attacks from all sides, forcing you to constantly defend yourself and expend massive amounts of energy just to maintain the status quo. You must guard your reputation with the ferocity of a soldier defending a fortress. History provides a spectacular illustration of how a formidable reputation can literally save lives and turn the tide of war. Consider the legendary Chinese strategist Zhuge Liang during the turbulent Three Kingdoms period. Zhuge Liang had cultivated a flawless reputation across the entire nation as an absolute genius of military tactics, a man who was never caught off guard, who always had a brilliant trick up his sleeve, and who never took completely reckless risks. One day, due to unforeseen circumstances, Zhuge Liang found himself occupying a small, poorly fortified city with only a handful of aging soldiers, while the massive, highly disciplined army of his rival, Sima Yi, marched directly toward him. By all logical metrics, Zhuge Liang was doomed. He had no troops, no weapons, and no time to call for reinforcements. Any other commander would have panicked or surrendered. Instead, Zhuge Liang relied entirely on the towering strength of his reputation. He ordered his few soldiers to hide, completely opened the city gates, and instructed a few monks to casually sweep the streets. Zhuge Liang himself, dressed in a Taoist robe, climbed to the top of the highest city wall, lit some incense, and calmly began to play his lute. When Sima Yi arrived with his massive army and saw this bizarre, peaceful scene, he was paralyzed by doubt. He knew Zhuge Liang's reputation intimately. He knew this man was a master of deception and ambushes. Sima Yi looked at the open gates, listened to the calm music, and concluded that this had to be a brilliant, deadly trap. Convinced that an invisible army was waiting to slaughter his men the moment they stepped inside the city, Sima Yi ordered a full retreat. Zhuge Liang's reputation alone repelled an entire army. To build this kind of power in your own life, you must consciously decide what primary quality you want to be known for. Do you want a reputation for unshakable integrity, unpredictable ruthlessness, peerless efficiency, or perhaps brilliant creativity? Once you select this quality, you must demonstrate it consistently and relentlessly. A reputation is built through 1,000 small actions, but it can be destroyed by a single severe misstep. If you cultivate a reputation for honesty, one significant lie will shatter it permanently. Keep your actions aligned with your public persona, and do not let others define your narrative. If someone attempts to slander you, you must strike back swiftly and decisively to protect your name. While a solid reputation anchors your power, the ability to create compelling visual spectacles elevates it to an entirely different level. Humans are highly visual creatures. We are easily distracted, easily bored, and profoundly moved by symbols, colors, and grand displays. Words can be argued with. Speeches can be analyzed and picked apart by critics. But a powerful visual spectacle bypasses the logical brain entirely and strikes directly at the emotional core. It creates an aura of authority and mystery that is almost impossible to challenge. Think of the brilliant 19th century showman P.T. Barnum, who understood the psychology of the masses better than almost anyone in history. Barnum did not just sell tickets to a museum. He created overwhelming sensory experiences. He draped his buildings in massive, colorful flags, hired brass bands to play loudly on the balconies, and illuminated the night sky with brilliant limelight. When people walked past Barnum's American Museum in New York City, they were not rationally evaluating whether the exhibits were scientifically accurate. They were completely mesmerized by the sheer scale of the spectacle. Barnum used visual overload to distract the public from the reality of his hoaxes and to generate an irresistible magnetism. You can harness the power of spectacle in everyday scenarios without needing a brass band. The clothes you wear, the design of your office, the timing of your arrivals, and the visual presentations you deliver all contribute to your aura. A leader who addresses their team while standing in a dimly lit, cluttered room commands far less respect than one who speaks from a well-lit, elevated position with a clean, striking background. Pay meticulous attention to the visual symbols you project. Use high-quality materials, bold colors, and dramatic timing to frame your actions. When you master the art of the spectacle, you subtly blind your audience to your flaws and weaknesses, forcing them to focus entirely on the magnificent image you have chosen to project. Point 5. Keep your hands clean always. In the pursuit of success and influence, you will inevitably encounter situations that require making deeply unpopular decisions, delivering harsh punishments, or executing ruthless strategies. A fundamental law of maintaining your authority and your pristine reputation is that you must never appear as the source of cruelty, mistakes, or dirty work. The public, your colleagues, and your subordinates must view you as a paragon of fairness, grace, and generosity. To achieve this, you must master the art of keeping your hands completely clean by utilizing scapegoats and cat's paws to execute the necessary but unsavory tasks of leadership. The concept of the cat's paw originates from an old fable about a monkey and a cat who are roasting chestnuts in a fire. The monkey desperately wants the delicious chestnuts, but is terrified of burning his own fingers. Using flattery and manipulation, the monkey convinces the naive cat to reach into the blazing fire and pull the chestnuts out one by one. The cat burns its paws severely, while the monkey happily eats the prize. In the realm of human dynamics, a cat's paw is a person you manipulate into doing the dangerous, risky, or unpopular work on your behalf, allowing you to reap the rewards while entirely avoiding the blame. Historical leaders were masters of this psychological distancing. Consider the brilliant and terrifying strategy of Cesare Borgia during the Italian Renaissance. Borgia had recently conquered the region of Romagna, which was plagued by crime, chaos, and rebellious factions. Borgia knew he needed to establish absolute order through brutal, unforgiving force. However, he also knew that if he personally executed the citizens and acted as a tyrant, the people would forever hate him and eventually rebel. To solve this dilemma, Borgia appointed a man named Ramiro de Orco as his governor. De Orco was known for his extreme cruelty and efficiency. Borgia essentially handed De Orco a blank check to pacify the region by any means necessary. De Orco did exactly that, using horrific violence, public executions, and heavy-handed laws to crush the rebellion and restore absolute order. The people of Romagna were terrified and furious. Once the region was completely stabilized, Borgia made his masterful, chilling move. To distance himself from the cruelty and to win the absolute love of the people, Borgia had Ramiro de Orco arrested, sliced in half, and displayed in the town square with a bloody knife beside him. The citizens were simultaneously relieved, grateful to Borgia for saving them from the monster, and deeply terrified of Borgia's hidden power. Borgia got exactly what he wanted: a peaceful, stabilized region, while keeping his own hands entirely clean of the violence used to achieve it. In the modern corporate world, this dynamic plays out constantly, though thankfully without the physical violence. A smart CEO who needs to execute massive layoffs will rarely do it themselves. Instead, they will hire an external consulting firm or a ruthless human resources director to act as the hatchet man. The consultant takes all the anger, tears, and resentment from the employees. Once the difficult restructuring is complete, the CEO can step back in, dismiss the consultant, and present themselves as the benevolent leader guiding the company into a new, prosperous era. If you need to deliver bad news, critique a project, or enforce an unpopular rule, find a way to let a third party, a strict policy manual, or a subordinate relay the message. Preserve your own image as the positive, supportive figure. To effectively maneuver people into doing your bidding, whether as allies or as cat's paws, you must develop a profound, almost clinical ability to read human nature. You must discover each person's thumbscrew. Everyone, no matter how confident or powerful they appear on the surface, has a hidden weakness, a psychological void, or an unfulfilled desire. It might be a deep-seated insecurity stemming from childhood, a desperate need for public validation, a secret financial pressure, or an uncontrollable vanity. Discovering these weaknesses requires active, empathetic listening and supreme observation. People naturally guard their deepest flaws, but they constantly leak clues through their informal conversations, their sudden emotional reactions, and the things they repeatedly complain about. If you notice a colleague who constantly boasts about their minor achievements, you have discovered a deep well of insecurity and a desperate need for praise. If you encounter a rival who loses their temper over the slightest perceived insult, you have found their emotional trigger. Once you identify the void, you hold the key to influencing that person. If someone craves validation, you become the sole provider of that validation, making them entirely dependent on your approval. If they are driven by a secret vanity, you appeal directly to that vanity to guide their decisions. You do not need to use this information maliciously. Knowing a person's thumbscrew is also the ultimate defensive weapon. When you know precisely what triggers your opponent, you can avoid setting them off, or you can deliberately trigger them at a strategic moment to make them lose their composure in a public setting. By keeping your own hands perfectly clean and quietly understanding the secret levers that control the people around you, you operate like an invisible puppet master, orchestrating outcomes with effortless precision. Point 6. Play the courtier to survive. In a world that increasingly praises unfiltered honesty, raw authenticity, and aggressive self-expression, it is vital to recognize that the fundamental structure of society has not changed since the days of the Renaissance. The modern world is, in essence, a giant, interconnected court. Whether you are navigating a massive corporate hierarchy, an influential academic institution, or a tight-knit community organization, the rules of the courtier still apply. Directness is very frequently punished as rudeness. Unvarnished honesty is often perceived as a direct threat to the egos of those around you. To survive and thrive in these environments, you must master the graceful, indirect, and highly observant art of playing the perfect courtier. The perfect courtier is a master of emotional intelligence, adaptability, and subtle charm. They are people who can effortlessly blend into any social environment, flattering their superiors without ever appearing like a sycophant, and outmaneuvering their rivals without ever leaving a trace of hostility. The ultimate historical embodiment of this archetype was the legendary French diplomat Charles Maurice de Talleyrand. Talleyrand was an absolute genius of survival. He managed to hold high-ranking positions of immense power during the reign of King Louis XVI, survived the bloody chaos of the French Revolution, became the indispensable foreign minister to the Emperor Napoleon Bonaparte, and then seamlessly transitioned back into power when the monarchy was restored. How did one man survive and flourish through so many violently opposing regimes, while thousands of others lost their heads to the guillotine? Talleyrand survived because he was entirely fluid and possessed an unparalleled understanding of human psychology. He never forced his opinions on others. He listened far more than he spoke. He was a master of indirect flattery. Instead of showering his superiors with obvious, clumsy compliments, he would subtly align his views with theirs, making them feel incredibly intelligent. He never allowed his own ego to get in the way of his survival. He recognized that the court is a stage, and he played whatever role the specific audience required at that exact moment. A crucial component of playing the courtier is learning to conceal your unorthodox beliefs. You are perfectly entitled to think whatever you like, to hold radical political views, and to harbor revolutionary ideas. However, if you boldly flaunt these unconventional ideas in environments that value tradition and conformity, you will be destroyed. People do not admire those who violently challenge their deeply held beliefs. They feel alienated, insulted, and threatened by them. Consider the ancient story of Pausanias, a great Spartan commander who achieved massive military victories for his city-state. Despite his success, Pausanias grew tired of the strict, austere, and deeply traditional Spartan way of life. After spending time abroad, he began dressing in lavish Persian clothing, demanding to sit on golden thrones and adopting foreign customs. He arrogantly flaunted his new lifestyle in front of his fellow Spartans, believing his military record made him untouchable. The Spartans, however, were deeply offended by his rejection of their culture. They viewed his behavior not as personal expression, but as an insult to their entire identity. They eventually turned on their great hero, trapping him inside a temple and starving him to death. By failing to behave like those around him, Pausanias engineered his own demise. Conformity on the outside is a protective shield. It grants you the safety and the freedom to be as radical as you wish on the inside. Furthermore, a true courtier understands that you can never force people to truly follow you through sheer authority or coercion. If you rely solely on your job title, your wealth, or your ability to punish people, you will breed a deep, hidden resentment that will inevitably erupt into sabotage. You must actively work on the hearts and minds of others. You must seduce people into wanting to follow you, making them feel that aligning with you is their own brilliant idea. History shows us the catastrophic results of ignoring the hearts of the masses. Queen Marie Antoinette of France completely failed to understand the emotional state of the French people. Whether or not she actually said the infamous words, "let them eat cake," the phrase perfectly captured the public's perception of her: arrogant, profoundly disconnected, and entirely unsympathetic to their agonizing poverty. She flaunted her extreme wealth and extravagant fashion, while the peasants completely starved in the streets. Because she never bothered to work on the hearts and minds of her subjects, when the revolution sparked, she had no reservoir of public goodwill to draw upon. The people felt absolute, burning hatred for her, and she was sent to the guillotine. To win hearts and minds in your own life, you must appeal to people's emotions, their self-interest, and their desire to feel valued. Learn their names, remember the details of their lives, and acknowledge their hard work publicly. Frame your requests not as demands, but as opportunities for them to shine. When you establish a genuine emotional connection with your colleagues and subordinates, they will defend you fiercely, forgive your occasional mistakes, and actively propel you towards success. The perfect courtier rules not with an iron fist, but with an invisible, velvet touch. Point 7. The conclusion. As we reach the culmination of our journey through the dynamics of influence and strategy, we encounter the ultimate, most advanced law of survival in a chaotic world: the necessity of assuming formlessness. Throughout human history, individuals, corporations, and entire empires have fallen into the fatal trap of rigidity. When you rely on a single, fixed strategy, when you rigidly attach yourself to a specific title, or when you build inflexible systems, you make yourself a highly visible, easily targetable monument. In a world defined by constant, unpredictable change, the rigid are inevitably shattered, while the fluid survive and conquer. Let us look at the ancient conflict between the great city-states of Sparta and Athens. Sparta was the ultimate rigid society. Everything in Spartan culture was completely subordinated to a singular goal: creating the perfect, invincible infantry soldier. Their laws, their economy, and their culture were fixed, unyielding, and totally resistant to outside influence or innovation. For a time, this rigid system made them the most feared military power on earth. Athens, by contrast, was messy, democratic, highly mercantile, and deeply adaptable. They focused on sea power, trade, and intellectual flexibility. When Sparta eventually defeated Athens in the Peloponnesian War, they found themselves in control of a vast, complex empire. However, the exact rigid, militaristic system that allowed them to win the war made them completely incapable of governing a diverse, shifting empire. They could not adapt to the nuances of diplomacy, economics, or naval administration. Because they could not change their form, their power rapidly crumbled, and the Spartan Empire collapsed into irrelevance. They had built a magnificent fortress, but a fortress cannot move, and eventually, the world simply bypassed it. To assume formlessness is to adopt the philosophy of water, a concept famously articulated by the legendary martial artist Bruce Lee. and practiced brilliantly by military strategists like Mao Zedong. During the Chinese Civil War, Mao was vastly outnumbered and outgunned by the nationalist forces. If Mao had adopted a traditional rigid military strategy, lining up his troops to defend fixed cities and engaging in direct conventional battles, his army would have been wiped out in a matter of weeks. Instead, Mao embraced total formlessness through guerrilla warfare. Mao's strategy was fluid and completely unpredictable. When the enemy advanced in overwhelming numbers, Mao's forces would dissolve and retreat into the mountains, offering no solid target to strike. When the enemy rested or stretched their supply lines too thin, Mao's forces would suddenly materialize, harass them mercilessly, and vanish again before a counterattack could be organized. By refusing to hold a fixed shape, Mao drove the conventional, rigid nationalist army to absolute exhaustion and eventual defeat. He understood that power does not come from holding ground. It comes from maintaining absolute mobility and initiative. In our incredibly fast-paced modern economy, the law of formlessness is more critical than ever before. We are living through an era of extreme technological disruption, where artificial intelligence, shifting global markets, and completely new business models are destroying traditional industries overnight. The individuals who suffer the most in this environment are those who cling desperately to a rigid identity. The person who says, "I am a traditional print journalist, and I will strictly do things the way they have always been done," is the person who becomes obsolete. The company that clings to a 5-year strategic plan despite massive shifts in consumer behavior will inevitably be crushed by more agile startups. You must train yourself to detach your ego from your past successes and your current methods. What worked brilliantly for you yesterday might be the exact thing that causes your downfall tomorrow. You must constantly observe the shifting currents of your industry and your social circles, and be completely willing to abandon a strategy the moment it stops yielding results. Never offer your enemies or your competitors a predictable pattern to analyze. If they expect you to be aggressive, be incredibly accommodating. If they expect you to be defensive, attack from an entirely new angle. Power is dynamic, not static. It is a continuous cycle of observation, adaptation, and execution. By deeply internalizing the lessons of these chapters, by controlling your emotions, managing your superiors with grace, turning enemies into assets, guarding your immaculate reputation, and maintaining absolute psychological flexibility, you transform yourself into an untouchable force. You are no longer a victim of circumstances or the hidden agendas of others. You become a master of the invisible art of control, capable of navigating any environment, overcoming any obstacle, and shaping your own extraordinary destiny in a complex, endlessly fascinating world.
Thank you for listening. Now do these 3 things. 1. Subscribe so you never miss a life-changing book. 2. Like this video. It helps us grow. 3. Share. Send this to one person you love. Yes, one person you love, because they deserve to change their life too. See you next time. Keep listening. Keep winning. Bye for now.